Hi everybody, welcome to the Sichos HaRan here. Tonight we're going to be doing Sicha 58 and 59. They're two short Sichos HaRan pieces, and the first one will discuss what a person needs in order to have chidushim, and the second one will discuss topics about raising children, and they're both really great, interesting pieces. I hope you enjoy. So let's just dive right in. We'll start with Sicha number 58. I'm just going to pull up the share screen. Okay, here we are. Okay, it's on the bottom over here. When you want to come up with new ideas in the Torah, you must concentrate on one particular subject. Take a verse or a topic and review it many times, hammering on the door until it is open for you. Sometimes a thought flashes through your mind and then escapes. You must be a man of valor, pursuing it until it is recaptured. Okay, so if a person is looking to have chidushim in Torah, Rebbe Nachman tells us they need to focus on that particular matter. Rebbe Nachman advises us learning it again and again until a door is open for you and you have this new idea, this new concept. He says sometimes a person thinks of something and then forgets it. So you have to chase that thought down until you could recapture it. So, we see that a person really needs to work on something in order to have new ideas in it. And we have to, sorry, I'm just going to stop the share screen. We have to have it be our own before the insights come in. It makes sense. If you look at any expert, if you look at a composer, if you look at an architect, they'll sit on the same music notes, they'll sit on the same plans in order to get some new insight. They know their stuff cold, and then from there, they grow into new ideas and expand and make it better. So I think a great time to have these different chidushim and to really focus on a Torah piece that you learn is really during Hisbodedus. I think, when there's solitude and we don't have the craziness with the cell phones and we're talking to Hashem and we learn a really inspiring, interesting piece, it's just a great time to really focus on it and to think about it. And I find that whenever I do that personally, it takes my Torah learning onto a whole new level, and it really, really goes a long way. So another part that I wanted to mention about this piece is, I love this part, how Rebbe Nachman says that we need to be a man of valor. We need to be courageous and brave, and we have to chase these forgotten thoughts. So if we think deeply about all the forgotten things, and I know practically here he's talking about new ideas and new insights, but I took this to mean forgetting about all our resolutions that we made, all our pledges that we made of taking on mitzvos and taking on different things. And we really do have to be brave to pursue them. It hit me when I read this because I actually plan on making Aliyah with my husband and my kids in August, Mirza Hashem. And obviously this move is going to be very challenging for all of us, for the kids, for me and my husband. And, I was telling my kids, I'm like, this is going to be really difficult. We're going to have a really hard time, but we're doing this because we're brave, because we're courageous. And moving to Israel was always something me and my husband wanted to do, but we weren't brave and courageous. It was kind of like a forgotten resolution for a very long time, let's just hope we get there. But, maybe some people had resolutions about davening every day, or maybe about saying a parak of Tehillim, with a lot of kavanah every day, or maybe saying brachos with intention, or maybe learning Hilchos Shabbos so they can keep Shabbos better. We all have a lot of resolutions and a lot of things that we really, really want to work on, and we know that it's important. But I think this line that Rebbe Nachman says about how we need to be a man of valor, like you really do have to have a lot of strength to follow these ideas and to chase them down and to make them your own and to, you know, take these resolutions and have them be yours and complete them. So I just thought that was an interesting point. And on that note, I would like to move on to the next Sikha. It's going to be an interesting one. It's Sikha number 59. I'm going to pull it up on the share screen. Okay, short one, but says it all. Okay. The best thing for children is to keep a proper distance from them, not playing with them all the time. It is best not to be overly attentive. The end. Okay. So Rebbe Nachman tells us these are the best things to do for our kids. 1, give kids space. 2, don't play with them too much. Not all the, don't play with them all the time. And 3, not to give them too much attention. So there is a footnote that's written here. I'll share it with you. We're going to look at footnote 91. Okay. This does not mean ignoring them. By distancing oneself, one remains a parent and not a friend of the child. Respect and awe of a parent remains, which makes it possible to raise that child as a responsible person. So, so it doesn't really mean ignoring your child, but you want to give proper space so that the children are aware that you're not their friends and that you're their parent and they need to have respect for you. So, okay, so it happens to be that Rebbe Erez Moshe Doron, a Breslov chassid and author, wrote an amazing book on raising children. I highly recommend it. It's called Dust to Gold. Honestly, he wrote another book that is phenomenal, and I'm just going to mention it here now too. He wrote a commentary on The Lost Princess called Wings. And there's a few other stories in that too. And they're really, really deep, very spiritual, beautiful commentaries. So, okay, but back to Dust to Gold, the book that we're discussing now. So he actually wrote a chapter called The Vacated Space, and he mentions this piece in Sichos HaRan that we just read. So I wanted to share it with all of you. And I hope you enjoy it. Let me pull up the share screen. Okay. Okay, parenting in the vacated space, giving children space. The perplexity and uncertainty associated with raising children are nothing new, but are rooted in the dawn of the world and earlier. From its first beginnings, the concepts of parent, child, and closeness distancing were imprinted on creation. How was the world created? Kabbalistic writing explained. So before we get into that, so basically, Rav Erez Moshe Doron is saying here that, the difficulties of raising kids is nothing new. And he's saying it actually all began when the world was created. There's some connection. There's a parallel to the creation of the world and to how parents have to parent their children. So we're going to read. Okay. God, in his great mercy, created the world to reveal his compassion. If he wouldn't have created the world, on whom would he have shown his compassion? Therefore, he created all the worlds from Atzilut, the highest of the spiritual worlds, down to the lowest point of our physical world, to make manifest his mercy. So Hashem created the world to show his chesed, to show his compassion. And he did this to show compassion on the world. So when God wanted to create the world, there was no place to create it, since all was his infinite presence. Therefore, God constricted his light, thus creating a vacated space. Within that vacated space, he created the world with all its states and attributes. So Hashem, who's infinite, was everywhere. And in order to create this world, he had to constrict his light and make this vacated space where he was going to put the world. Okay, that's from Eitz Chaim. So now we're going to continue reading. Rebbe Nachman explains, without the vacated space, the world cannot have been created. It is impossible for us to grasp the concept of constriction and vacated space, since it is the coexistence of two opposites, yesh, existence, and ayin, nothingness. The vacated space came about when God removed his godliness from that place, as it were. Otherwise, the space could not be said to be vacated, since God's presence was everywhere. So Rebbe Nachman comes to tell us, further on this, that it's impossible for us to understand these concepts, because it's, he created an empty space and then put something in it. So it's like he created something from nothing. It's our minds can't grasp this. But there is some element that Hashem had to, constrict his light and make this empty space, and that's where he put the world. The universe, not just the world. Okay. Okay. But in truth, there is godliness even in that vacated space. So Rebbe Nachman's bringing a new point here, that even though there's this empty space where Hashem constricted his light, still there is godliness there. Because nothing can exist without receiving vitality from God. Only in the future world will it be possible for us to grasp this concept. So even though, like we read, Hashem constricted his light and kind of like took himself away from the space, it's impossible that the space could exist without Hashem. Like in order for the space to exist, Hashem needs to be in it. So it's very hard to grasp, but bottom line is that there's some type of emptiness but still Hashem is there fueling it. So he's still there in this vacated space. Okay, here we go. Reading on. Parenting presents a similar paradox, the painful conflict between opposites, parent and child. On the one hand, the child is a physical extension of the parent, his own flesh and blood. On the other hand, he's a separate, different creation. In between parent and child, there is a vacated space. So Rav Doron comes to say that parenting creates this similar predicament, right? Because on the one hand, the child is a part of us. He's connected to us. He came from us. But on the other hand, he's his own separate being. He's his own self. He's not connected to us. So in between parent and child, there is this space, this vacated space. Rebbe Nachman explains that God is called Father, Av, in Hebrew, while creation as a whole is called Son, Ben. The Kabbalah explains that in the beginning, God's infinite light was all there was. Creation existed only in potential. This stage is called Eben, Av. Av and Ben as one. The second stage of creation was the constriction of God's infinite light and the formation of the vacated space, devoid of God's presence, as it were. Within that space, God created the world, at which point the Av and Ben were separated. Creation became an independent entity, separate from God, as it were. Specifically, under these circumstances, could the love of the Av for his Ben be revealed? So there were two stages. The first stage, so there's, when there's Hashem, there's the Father, and then there's the Son. And then the second stage is, again, of this constriction, where Hashem made this vacated space. And then there's this third stage of, all right, I'm just going to read. In the third and final stage, to take place after the final redemption, which we all await, God will be revealed within creation. At this time, Av and Ben will be reunited, not as they were before creation, but with the Ben still retaining its separateness. This brings us back to the original paradox of unity and separateness existing concurrently, which, as Rebbe Nachman says, no human intellect can perceive. So, he's just really kind of saying the same thing here about how there is this separateness and togetherness that's going on. That's very hard to to wrap our heads around. Okay, so I'm just going to skip to the roots of the parent-child conflict. A common pitfall afflicting almost every parent is the failure to recognize that the child as he really is, with his individual perception, nature, and desires, is not the child in the parent's mind. So a common pitfall, he says, is when the parents don't see the child as a separate person, as who they really are. They see the child as like what they were, what they should be in the parent's mind. When we see these two as one, we're mixing reality with imagination. Disappointed expectations breed disappointment in the actual child. The negative feelings aroused, resentment, anger, helplessness, settle on him. We don't say, I'm disappointed because my expectations, my imaginary child weren't fulfilled. The child as I pictured him to myself hasn't been actualized. We say, I'm disappointed in my child, the actual child, and that's a mistake. So when we get upset at our kids, we don't see it as, oh, we're upset at what we thought our kid would be because our kid is like us and connected to us. We see it as, which is reality, that's what it is, but we see it as, no, like we're upset at the child is who he is at that point. And Rebbe Doron says that that's very damaging to the child. And he says, like, a relationship, I'm just going to recap some of this, a relationship is like a puzzle. And like if a parent places themselves where they're supposed to be, then things naturally have a way of falling into place. And he says, of course, he doesn't, not all the, of course this doesn't work all the time, but many times it does work like that. So, okay, now thus Rebbe Nachman explains, the best thing for children is to keep your distance from them, not to cling to them, dandling them all the time. It's best not to pay any attention to them at all. It's easy to misunderstand this statement, to interpret it as a license to refrain from giving the child love and warmth. Indeed, certain individuals whose nature or life circumstances have made them cold and aloof find in these words justification for their mistaken conduct. So he says, like, some people read this Sikha that we originally read, and they think, okay, perfect excuse to ignore my kids, just like I was doing before. But Rebbe Doron is coming to say that's not really what he means. Okay, what does Rebbe Nachman really mean? The best thing for children, smart, good, God-fearing children, is to keep your distance from them. Keeping a distance means knowing that the child and I are two separate entities, not one entity with one perspective, one nature, one desire. This distance will make it possible for the child to grow. Such is not the case with a parent who's too close to the child, stifling him, overprotecting him, impressing upon him his own existence, and not allowing the child's separate and independent existence to be revealed and to develop. Keeping a distance means to give a child space, vacated space, to make his own choices. So Rebbe Doron says that keeping this distance, that he says the best thing for children is to keep this distance, to realize that parents are separate from the child, that the child is his own or her own being. I think that's huge, and it's so important. I think there's so much insight there. Like, I think many of us know helicopter moms, and maybe dads too, right? And we all know that the damage that it does to children. I was talking to a friend the other day who's actually a generation older than me, and we were like in this conversation, and all of a sudden she looks at me and she's like, what is up with your generation? And I was a little taken aback, and I asked, why? What do you mean? So she's actually a teacher in a local high school in the area. So she was telling me her perspective, and she was just going on and on. She was saying, the way you guys all dote on your kids, she was saying, she's like, I've never seen anything like it. And she was saying how mothers like wait outside the school that she teaches in to deliver their kids lunch from restaurants, iced coffees and salads. And she told me stories about how mothers call her like regularly, freaking out about tests and homework, And she just like is always like, it's not for you, it's for your child. Like, I'm teaching the student, I'm not teaching the parent. I mean, I was cracking up as she was telling me this, because I was just thinking about my phone and all the WhatsApp chats and like the, you know, the class WhatsApp chats. And if people would see my, you know, the phone and the WhatsApp chats and like these mothers, and I'm not judging, but you know, there's definitely like, I don't know what, there is something with our generation and this doting on our kids and trying to do everything for the kids. Like, every night on my WhatsApp chat, I get, what's for homework, you know? I remember when I was younger and I didn't have my homework, I had to call a friend myself and get the homework and, you know, like just figure things out for myself. But, you know, like I do see that the mothers are handling everything these days. But either way, like you know, this whole conversation, she was 100% on the money with everything she said. And I really think it talks to this point that Rebbe Nachman is saying too. I mean, she went on to say, which this part wasn't so funny, is she was saying like the kids are not better for it. She was saying how she sees like the kids in her class, they're so much more depressed. You know, she was saying how the kids have no self-worth because they don't do anything on their own. Everything their mothers or fathers or parents or grandparents are doing for them. You know, and it's a terrible thing to do to our kids. So I think just like many of us mothers, we need to, you know, and fathers, we need to trust our children. And we need to know that kids are their own people. And, you know, being a person, being born, you know, Hashem gave us survival skills, and Hashem gave our children survival skills. And we have this innate intelligence that's working for us, that's helping all of us and our children get by. And we need to have a little more trust in that. You know, children are their own people, just like we're not exactly like our parents. So I know that some people might read this piece and hear what I'm saying and find it controversial, but I think this piece is amazing, and I find it to be 100% true. And I think, you know, parents should definitely take the time to think about this. So I give us all a bracha that we should find the strength to stick to our resolutions and, you know, trust our kids and trust Hashem that who gave us and gave our children everything we need to get by. So, and of course, we should all have lots of nachas from our children and from all Klal Yisrael. So thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful night.